Hello, welcome to Facebook Live for the fall at the Green Bay Botanical Gardens. My name is Michael. I am the fall education intern here, and it is a gorgeous day to be outside. The moon's out, it's pretty warm, but it's not going to be warm for much longer. Winter is definitely on the way. And one thing that a lot of people don't think about the winter is that while we can just get up and go indoors, plants often can't do that unless they're very leggy and can make a sprint forward inside, but not a lot of them can do that. So they're usually stuck outside during the winter, which is pretty tough. It's a big challenge for any living creature to be outside during the winter. One thing that can cause damage for plants, animals, humans is freezing. So freezing is really bad. We are cellular organisms, so we're made out of cells and a lot of fluid, a lot of liquid, and if that freezes, it can cause serious damage because ice crystals are pretty sharp, and that is not good. So plants and animals all have to try and avoid freezing during the winter. And while we have brains and we have calendars and we know winter is coming, it's a little different for plants. They don't have brains, but they do have some senses that allow them to tell that cold weather and winter is on the way. They know how much light they're getting, so they can sense how much daylight is available. They can sense which angle that light is coming from, and they can also sense the temperature. So they know from those signs that it's starting to get colder, winter is on the way, it's time to get ready for that, for their winter preparations. And that often involves signaling of hormones in plants that start to spur on a new set of changes for them as the winter starts to come forth. So today we're going to be talking about some of the adaptations that plants have for the winter and what kind of damages they can face. So some of the internal adaptations that I've learned about that are really cool that plants have for dealing with the winter. As I said, they don't want to freeze. So one thing they can do to avoid freezing is to actually draw some of the water and liquid out of their cells and place it in parts of the plant where it can freeze safely without causing harm to the plant, which in my opinion is really cool. It's called extracellular freezing and helps prevent those cells from getting skewered by ice crystals. Also, other types of plants can actually concentrate the amount of sugars and salts inside their fluids, and it actually acts almost as an antifreeze that stops that liquid from freezing in the plant, which in my opinion is really cool. Besides just those things, a lot of plants will actually go into dormancy, so they're essentially cranking down the growth stage and getting ready for the rest stage. Pretty much being ready to troop it out through the winter and not focus on photosynthesizing and growing and producing quite as much. So those are some good internal changes that plants have for the winter. But what about external changes? Well, the one that we think of most often with our trees here, the fall colors, dropping leaves and dropping above ground plant matter is really useful. Plants don't want to have that surface area exposed to the cold and the wind during the winter, so actually losing those leaves helps keep them safe. It helps reduce surface area on the plant that would be exposed during the winter and the fall. So those are ways that the plants can physically adapt to some of the changing temperatures. Losing the above ground portion often won't hurt some plants, like those with bulbs or perennials that are tolerant to the cold. They can actually retreat underground with their robust root systems or with bulbs that will keep them safe throughout the winter, and then they can just regrow when conditions are good enough again. And some plants will actually just set seed. Sometimes it's so tough to make it through the winter that you might as well just pass it on to the kids and just let them sprout up in the spring and take it from there rather than trying to troop it through a tough season. So those are some of the adaptations, internal and external, that plants have to deal with the cold. But what kind of damages do they face? Well, I already mentioned freezing's really bad. If you'll come here and look at our coleus, it actually got a little frost touched. So when a plant is exposed to the cold, it will shrivel up. And that is the cells and materials inside the plant dying off. And it's not just herbaceous or green parts of plants that are vulnerable to that. Some woody plants can be as well, especially if they have thinner bark or they're not as well insulated and protected from that kind of damage. But it's not just the temperature that plants have to worry about, it's also the physical aspect of snow and cold during the winter that can be really damaging on plants. So if you've ever carried jugs of water around, you know that water can be very heavy. Snow and ice will accumulate on branches, on twigs, on leaves, on anything with that extra surface area and weigh those plants down. And if you've seen videos of bad ice storms in Wisconsin or lived through them yourself, you know it can bring down even power lines and even pretty big, robust structures. So snow and ice are a serious challenge for plants. They want to get rid of that surface area. Another reason that they want to get rid of surface area is because plants transpire or kind of have water evaporating from their leaves. Normally that drives the flow of liquids in the plant from the root system up through the stem, up out of the leaves, kind of keeping things in a good motion. But during the winter, that presents an extra challenge for them, because if you think about snow and ice, while they are made out of water, that water isn't available to the plant if they can't take it up through their roots. So if the ice is frozen and the snow is frozen and it doesn't get warm enough to melt, they essentially can be in their own desert surrounded by water. Kind of like a person being out on a boat in the middle of the saltwater ocean. If you can't drink that water and it's not available to you, you're going to dehydrate fast. So those are two of the ways that plants can be damaged by the winter. But there's a couple others too. One that I learned about recently is called Sunscald, and it is actually damage from heat and sun. And you're going to say, wait, Michael, how does heat and sun damage plants if they don't want to be cold and freezing is bad? Well, during the day, some trees have broad bark surfaces, broad trunks. If the sun is shining on those trunks, it can actually heat up significantly to a much greater degree on one side of the plant than the other, and that fools the plant into thinking, oh, well, dormancy's over, it's getting really warm. It's time to add the food back to the cells, time to get ready, and all of a sudden, if you've lived in Wisconsin, you know this happens, it gets cold very fast and very quickly. The sun sets, clouds come out, it gets very windy. So when that happens, the parts of plants can freeze and die off and even just rupture and break, especially when spring comes. And if you check the southwest side of plants during the spring, especially like trees with thinner bark, like ash, maple, or even like plants like plums, you can see some of that sunscald damage, and young trees like saplings are especially vulnerable. And another Wisconsin one that a lot of us will be familiar with, ways that plants can be damaged, is through their root system. So if you've ever driven in the spring, and I call it setting money aside for new tires in the suspension season, if you've driven in the spring season in Wisconsin, you will know that the ground can contract and expand, which can cause roadway damage. That also happens to the ground too, and that can break plant root systems, or can even upturn certain plants and upheave them right out of the ground. And having those exposed roots are not good for plants during the winter. So we've talked about some of the adaptations that plants have for dealing with cold, as well as how they can be damaged. Next, we're going to take a little walk down there, and we're going to talk about ways that you can actually protect some of your plants from some of your landscape plants from the winter season and all of the challenges that they're going to face. The first, easiest one, most basic, is knowing what to plant. If you are planting something outdoors, you're going to want something that's cold tolerant if you're planning on keeping it for more than just a season or two. So check the plant hardiness We will actually have a link to the plant hardiness zones of Wisconsin, a map with that. But essentially is a number ranking that tells you how hardy your plant is. And you can find that information on seed packets, tree tags, labels like that that will let you know how hardy your plant is and what it's able to tolerate in Wisconsin, depending on where you are in Wisconsin. There are different zones across the United States. Second one, and I often forget this despite it being extremely simple, is just bringing in plants that you have outside, potted plants or annuals if you can pot them, bringing them indoors and putting them in a sunny location. The most available sun you have can allow them to last a bit longer than they normally would, just freezing and passing away outside. I'd mentioned that the wind can be really tough on some plants, especially plants like conifers that still have some of their leaves or needles that can still lose some of that water. Having plants planted in areas that are more sheltered is a really smart idea, so less exposed to the harsh winter wind. You can also make barriers, physical barriers that will allow the wind to be less of an issue. You can make them out of canvas, wood, essentially just windbreaks that will stop some of the harsh wind from really bearing down on plants and drying them out. Pests like deer and rabbits can be an issue too. They're hungry during the winter and there's not a lot for them to eat. And as much as I want to see them make it through the winter too, I don't want them to be eating my landscape plants. So putting up small fencing or barriers around areas where you have things planted that you don't want them to browse on is a really good idea. They'll often be looking for bark or twigs, and it can hit young trees and shrubs really hard. So consider putting up fencing if you've got pests like that in your area. Also, you don't want to promote growth for your plants late in the season. So in late summer, consider honing back the pruning, the watering, the fertilizing. You don't want your plants to start thinking, wow, it's time to get ready to grow, and then it gets cold. So scale those things back. You can cut plant matter down and reduce it, but it's recommended that you do that later in the fall season before freezing. You can also water your plants then too to give them more available moisture before it gets cold. You just want to do it when it's solidly cold and late in the season so your plants aren't fooled into thinking that it's time to start growing. And one of the best tips I'd like to give is for mulching. Mulching is a really important way of protecting the root systems of plants from a lot of different things, including temperature fluctuations. So for flower beds, trees, shrubs, you can put a layer of about 2 to 6 inches of mulch on the ground. You can use various types of mulch, wood chips, straw, compost. And for trees at least, you can look at our calorie pear here, and you can see that it's in a ring shape. You want to do a ring shape of mulch around the tree, a couple inches deep, kind of like a donut shape, and you don't want to put it too close against the actual base of the tree. It's usually good to leave a little bit of space between where your mulch is and where the tree base is. For garden beds, it's not as important. You can just kind of layer mulch around the plant to help protect them from some of that winter damage. Those are some of the tips that will help you protect your plants this winter from all the winds and the colds and the crazy ground splitting. We've talked about the adaptations that plants have for dealing with the cold. We've talked about the damage they can face, and we've talked about some of the basic tips that you can do to help protect plants. If you have any fantastic tips, feel free to leave them in the comments and tell us and share them with other people. We will also have a link to that hardiness zone map. Thank you very much for joining me today. It's beautiful out, but I've still got more work to do, so I'm going to be getting inside like plants can't. We will be having another Facebook Live the week after next. So we hope you join us for that, and we hope to see you here at the garden. You can come see how we're preparing some of our plants for the winter. So feel free to stop on in. Hope to see you all next time.